My name is Julia Bursten. I am an assistant professor of philosophy at the University of Kentucky in the United States. I am a researcher in the philosophy of nanoscience primarily, so my background is in chemistry, physics, material science, and engineering. I've had to study all of these sciences in order to become the kind of philosopher that I am. During my graduate work, I was funded by the National Science Foundation in the United States to carry out research with a laboratory of nanochemists at the University of Pittsburgh. I completed a 4-year term in the Millstone Nanosynthesis Lab at the University of Pittsburgh, where I participated actively as a member of the research group in my capacity as a philosopher of science. So I brought issues of conceptual clarity to their research meetings and trained with them on various methods in the lab as well. So nanoscience is the study of materials at the nanoscale, which is 1 to 100 nanometers. It is a scale around a few hundredths of a width of the human hair, and material at that scale behaves very differently than macroscopic material. So what's interesting scientifically about nanomaterials is that they behave very differently than macroscopic materials made of the same stuff. What's interesting philosophically about the behavior of nanomaterials is that when we shrink materials down to that scale, all of the normal theories of matter that we have for macroscopic materials sort of fall out the window, and we see a regime where quantum behavior and classical behavior are really butting heads to try and explain and predict how materials are going to behave. That's part of why it's such a ripe area for philosophical consideration, as well as such an interesting and productive area of scientific research. So in my research with the nanoscientists in Pittsburgh, I spent a lot of time with them trying to figure out not only what the materials are that they're making and how they behave and how those behaviors can be used in technologies, everything from drug delivery to solar cells to semiconductors to the colors on your cell phone right now, to think not only about how all of those behaviors are part of what makes nanoscience, but also how trying to explain material behavior at that scale is part of what makes nanoscience. And that's part of why we need philosophy to do it. So as one example of the sort of work that I do, when you shrink a material down to the nanoscale, the relationship between the interior of the material and the surface of the material changes, where the surface of most materials, even materials as small as individual human hairs, it's basically none of the material. Most of the materials are on the inside. At the nanoscale, a lot of the material is on the surface, and that means we have to think about the material differently, we have to explain it and model it differently, and studying the way that scientists build models and explanations and theories is exactly what philosophers of science do. That's exactly why I was in the lab, and there were a few times where being able to think about a material differently through the logical and conceptual training of philosophy actually saved us time and money, and was able to rescue dying experiments in the lab from the crisis of just running out of ways of trying to rerun a data sample. So I primarily publish in philosophy journals, especially philosophy of science journals and history of science journals for other scholars like myself. But I also make a point of publishing in science journals with scientists and on my own. So I've written articles for Nature Nanotechnology, which is one of the Nature journals. It's a premier journal for nanoscience and nanotechnology, as well as the Journal of Physical Chemistry Letters, which is a professional journal for physical chemists. I've also given talks at both scientific and philosophical conferences, as well as general audience intellectual conferences. My methods are quite active. I spend a lot of time in collaboration with scientists and both in the lab learning about the way that they are doing their science, but also using philosophical concepts, philosophical reasoning tools in order to probe and investigate and hopefully make better the way that science is being carried out. So I have worked with chemists primarily, but I am also working currently with plant pathologists, and I have students who are working with computer scientists. So my methodology is to really dig into scientific practice and look at the way that science is carried out beyond the publication record in order to understand and improve scientific reasoning.